the quiet watcher, and the lively neighbor. The mingled scents of ancient paper and drenched earth drifted through Noah's open window, a familiar, comforting blend. He settled deeper into his well-worn armchair, a weighty philosophical text open in his lap, though his gaze had strayed to the scene outside. Below, streetlights cast wavering, elongated reflections on the slick asphalt, painting the wet surface in hues of amber and silver. From his second-story vantage, Noah surveyed the neighborhood, a silent observer in a world often too loud for his liking. His attention, habitually, snagged on the house opposite, Elias's house. Typically, Elias's porch buzzed with activity, a magnet for laughter and animated conversation. Even as dusk gathered, a faint murmur of music and distant voices usually carried across the street, a constant reminder of the vibrant spirit residing next door. Elias, Noah had noted, was perpetually encircled. He was the sun, drawing a small, brilliant constellation of people into his orbit, always smiling, always gesticulating with an effortless charm that seemed to captivate. Noah, conversely, was a moon, content to reflect light from a safe remove. His own path, a quiet, solitary ellipse. Today, however, was different. The rain, a steady, insistent drumming against his window pane, had driven most indoors. The street lay deserted, save for a lone cat darting between parked cars. Elias's porch, usually adorned with cushions and lanterns, was starkly bare. Noah watched as Elias himself emerged, not with his customary sprightly step, but with a slow, deliberate pace. He carried a mug, a wisp of steam curling into the damp air, and sank onto the porch swing. It groaned softly under his weight. There were no friends, no lively discussions, no melodies spilling from the open door. Just Elias, enveloped by the encroaching gloom and the relentless patter of rain. He stared into the street, his shoulders hunched, his usually bright demeanor clouded by an unfamiliar wistfulness. A sigh escaped him, a quiet exhalation that somehow traversed the distance and resonated with Noah. Noah felt a flicker of surprise, a tiny spark of curiosity igniting within his chest. He had never witnessed Elias like this, never without the comforting buffer of company, the effervescent energy that seemed to define him. The man across the street, typically a beacon of effortless charisma, now seemed diminished, vulnerable, a lone silhouette against the deepening twilight. He observed Elias lift the mug to his lips, then lower it without drinking. Elias's gaze was distant, fixed on some unseen point beyond the rain-streaked glass of Noah's own apartment. A weariness, previously unnoticed, etched itself around his eyes, a subtle tension in his jaw. It was a stark contrast to the beaming, engaging figure Noah usually studied, the man who effortlessly held court on his porch, whose laughter echoed easily on the breeze. Noah leaned closer to the window, the cool pain pressing against his forehead. He usually prided himself on dispassionate observation, on discerning the subtle nuances of human behavior from a respectful distance. But this sight, Elias's unexpected isolation, stirred something beyond mere scrutiny. It was a quiet empathy, a recognition of shared human experience that transcended their disparate lives. He considered his own evenings, spent amidst the comforting hush of his books, the rhythmic turning of pages, a soothing accompaniment to his thoughts. His quiet existence was a conscious choice, a sanctuary from the relentless demands of the outer world. He valued introspection, the deep dives into literature and philosophy that enriched his inner landscape. He rarely felt lonely. Solitude was his companion, not a burden. But Elias seemed to thrive on connection, on the constant hum of social interplay. Or so Noah had always presumed. To see him stripped of that, to witness him in a moment of unguarded sadness, felt like catching a glimpse behind a meticulously constructed facade. It was a jarring revelation, like a vibrant, flourishing blossom suddenly wilting under an unexpected frost. A shiver traced Noah's spine, though not from the evening's chill. It was a premonition, a subtle shift in the carefully maintained equilibrium of his world. He had always viewed Elias as a distant, almost mythological figure, a character in the ongoing drama of the neighborhood. Now, in this quiet moment of shared rain and unspoken melancholy, Elias felt real. And Noah, the quiet watcher, felt a faint, unfamiliar pull toward the man across the street. He closed his book, the leather cover exhaling softly. The rain continued its steady descent, cleansing the world and nurturing the nascent curiosity stirring within Noah's heart. A knock in the night. 3 nights later, the memory of Elias on his porch, a lone silhouette against the shimmering curtain of rain, still occasionally drifted through Noah's mind. It was a peculiar image, stubbornly persistent. Noah, usually content in his self-imposed solitude, found himself glancing out his window more often than before, a low hum of curiosity stirring within him. He told himself it was merely a fascination with the unexpected, a deviation from the predictable rhythm of his quiet existence. Elias, the perpetually jovial host, the magnetic center of every weekend gathering, had presented a new facet, a quiet sorrow that felt incongruous and strangely compelling. Tonight, the wind was a soft sigh against the window panes, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. Noah was engrossed in a particularly dense passage of ancient history, the lamplight casting a warm, intimate glow over his worn armchair, and the stacks of books that formed a kind of intellectual fortress around him. The rhythmic turning of pages, the gentle scratching of his pen in the margins. These were the familiar sounds of his world. Then, a sound that didn't belong, a hesitant rap, barely audible above the rustle of leaves outside. It wasn't the confident, almost demanding knock of a delivery person, nor the familiar, cheerful pound of Elias's usual entourage. This was tentative, almost apologetic. Noah frowned, lowering his book. Who would be at his door at this hour, long past 9? He rarely entertained guests, and those few who did visit respected his unspoken boundaries of time. He rose slowly, a flicker of annoyance preceding a prickle of unease. As he approached the door, the sound came again, a little louder this time, but still soft, as if the knuckles making contact were hesitant, unsure of their right to disturb. He peered through the peephole, a tiny, distorted lens to the world outside. Elias! Noah blinked, then looked again. It was undeniably him, but not the Elias he knew. The vibrant energy that usually radiated from him was absent, replaced by a subdued stillness. His shoulders were slightly slumped, and his usually impeccable hair was ruffled, as if he'd run a hand through it repeatedly. He wore a simple dark hoodie, the hood pulled down, but its shadow still lent a somber cast to his features. His gaze, usually so direct and sparkling, was downcast, fixed on the worn welcome mat beneath his feet. There was a vulnerability in his posture, an almost childlike air of being lost. Noah's initial annoyance evaporated, replaced by a wave of surprise, then something akin to concern. He unlatched the door, the click echoing in the sudden quiet of the night. Elias looked up, his eyes, dark in the dim porch light, meeting Noah's. They held a profound weariness, a depth of sadness Noah hadn't witnessed before. There was no boisterous greeting, no easy smile, just a simple, almost whispered request. Noah? Elias's voice was rough, a little hoarse. I was wondering if I could just talk for a minute. He shifted his weight, his hands shoved into the pockets of his hoodie. He looked like a man adrift, seeking an anchor in an unexpected port. Noah stared at him, the ancient history book momentarily forgotten. This was an unprecedented event. Elias, the social butterfly coming to his door, alone, and looking so utterly undone. The shift from outward gregariousness to this raw, unguarded plea was jarring, yet oddly compelling. The empathy Noah had felt that rainy evening, a fleeting sensation, now solidified, demanding action. Elias, Noah said, his voice softer than he intended. He stepped back, opening the door wider. The warmth and light from his living room spilled out onto the porch, a silent invitation. Of course, come in. Elias hesitated for a moment, as if weighing the gravity of his request against the unexpected kindness of the offer. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he stepped across the threshold, bringing with him a faint scent of rain and an unspoken burden that seemed to fill the quiet space between them. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing them both inside the unusual intimacy of the late hour. First words in the silence. Noah stepped aside, the hinges of the heavy oak door groaning a low welcome as Elias crossed the threshold. The familiar scent of old paper and dust motes dancing in the single shaft of moonlight from the window filled the air. Elias hesitated just inside, his shoulders slumping a fraction, as if the weight he carried had momentarily increased with the privacy of the space. Noah simply gestured towards the worn leather armchair by the unlit fireplace, its cushions molded to the contours of countless hours spent in contemplation. He settled into his own, a high-backed wing chair that offered a partial view of the garden, now a tapestry of shadows under the moon. The silence that descended was thick, not of discomfort, but of a shared understanding that words, for now, were superfluous. The tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall became a resonant heartbeat in the stillness. Noah watched Elias, not overtly, but through the peripheral vision of a man accustomed to observing without intrusion. Elias's gaze drifted around the room, taking in the overflowing bookshelves, the maps tacked to the walls, the half-finished sketch on an easel in the corner. A familiar landscape, rendered in charcoal, waiting for its final strokes. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a quiet absorption, as if he were cataloguing every detail, storing it away. Minutes stretched into what felt like an hour. The tension in Elias's frame, though subdued, remained. His hands, usually so expressive, rested clasped between his knees, knuckles pale. Noah made no move to break the quiet. He simply existed, a steady presence, allowing Elias the space to untangle whatever knot had brought him here. The air grew cooler as the night deepened, and Noah subtly adjusted his position, the creak of the leather a small punctuation mark in the quiet. Finally, Elias stirred. He took a slow, deep breath that seemed to fill his lungs to their capacity, then exhaled even more slowly. His eyes, when they met Noah's, were clouded with an emotion Noah couldn't quite decipher, a blend of weariness and a nascent fear. "It's a lot," Elias began, his voice raspy, a stark contrast to the usual melodic cadence Noah associated with him. He paused, as if testing the words, finding them insufficient. "Everything, really." He shifted, leaning back into the armchair, his gaze fixed on the dying embers in the fireplace, though no fire had been lit. "My life, it's undergoing a significant reevaluation. A very, very significant reevaluation." He chuckled, a humorless sound that quickly dissolved. "Which is a polite way of saying it's all gone to hell, I suppose." Noah offered no platitudes, No facile assurances. He simply nodded, a small, encouraging gesture that invited Elias to continue, but without pressure. He understood the need for a listener, not a problem solver, in moments like these. It started subtly, I think, Elias continued, his voice gaining a little more strength, though still laced with a profound weariness. Little things, at first, a feeling of disconnect, like I was watching my own life from a distance. And then, it wasn't subtle anymore. It became an avalanche. He paused again, searching for the right words, his brow furrowed in concentration. The foundations, Noah, the things I thought were bedrock, immutable. They're not. They're crumbling. Or maybe they were never as solid as I believed. He ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it further. It's confusing. Utterly, completely confusing. Like waking up in a house you thought was your own, only to find the walls are in different places, the furniture rearranged, and you don't quite recognize the person staring back at you from the mirror. He sighed, a heavy sound that seemed to carry the weight of his unarticulated turmoil. I don't know what's real anymore, or what I want, and that, I think, is the most terrifying part. Elias finally looked at Noah directly, his eyes holding a fragile vulnerability. I just needed to talk, or just be with someone. The ritual begins. The brass knocker, cool against Elias's knuckles, became a familiar prelude to the quiet solace. It was often well past midnight when he arrived, the city's hum a distant muted thrum outside Noah's study window. Each time the door would open after only a moment, Noah's silhouette framed by the soft glow from within, a silent invitation. The first few nights, Elias spoke little, merely accepting the offer of a warm mug and the comfortable armchair. He'd stare into the flickering amber of the dying fire, the silence between them a balm. Noah, true to his nature, never pressed. He'd simply sit, perhaps turn a page of the book he perpetually seemed to be reading, his presence a steady, anchor-like weight in the room. Then, one evening, Elias sighed, a deep, bone-weary sound that seemed to pull something taut within him. I feel thin, he murmured, surprising even himself with the admission. Like, I'm stretched too far across something I don't understand anymore. Noah's gaze, when it met his, was unclouded, free of judgment. Thinness can make you brittle, he observed, his voice a low, melodic hum. Or it can make you transparent, letting in light you couldn't see before. Elias chuckled without humor. Right now, it just feels like I could snap. The subsequent nights followed a similar pattern. Elias would arrive, sometimes with the scent of rain clinging to his coat, other times with the crisp chill of a late autumn wind. He'd shed the outer layers of his day, not just his physical coat, but the carefully constructed facade he wore for the world. He spoke in fragments, like scattered shards of a broken mirror. I'm just tired, Noah, he confessed one Tuesday, slumping into the armchair, as if gravity had suddenly doubled its pull. So profoundly tired of pretending, of chasing things I thought I wanted. Noah set his teacup down with a soft click. What were you chasing, Elias? Elias ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of exasperation and confusion. Success, I suppose. Approval. A certain kind of life. But now it all feels hollow. Like I'm playing a part in a play where I've forgotten the lines and the audience has left. Noah listened, his eyes rarely leaving Elias's face, yet without being intrusive. He offered no immediate solutions, no platitudes. His responses were often questions, gently guiding Elias to explore the labyrinth of his own thoughts. And what does that hollowness feel like exactly? He'd ask. Or What do you think you've forgotten? Another night, Elias arrived looking particularly disheveled, his tie askew, a faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. I had dinner tonight, he began, staring blankly at the unlit hearth. With Miranda. She's lovely, truly, intelligent, witty. But halfway through the meal, I found myself thinking, is this it? Is this the pinnacle? Polite conversation, a shared bottle of wine, a pretense of connection? I felt like an imposter. Noah's expression remained calm. And what did you want to feel? Elias hesitated, searching for the words. Something real. Something resonant. Not just the echo of what's expected. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I don't know who I am anymore, Noah. All the things I identified with, all the roles I played. They feel like costumes I can't shed. And underneath, I'm not sure there's anything left. Noah reached for a small, leather-bound volume from the side table, turning it over in his hands. Perhaps, he said, his voice soft. It's not that there's nothing left, Elias. Perhaps it's that you're finally seeing the space where something new wants to grow. The words hung in the air, a different kind of silence this time, one filled with possibility rather than emptiness. Elias looked at Noah, truly looked at him, and for the first time a flicker of something akin to understanding, or perhaps just a nascent hope, stirred within his chest. These late-night talks, initially a refuge from his unraveling world, were slowly becoming a quiet ritual, a gentle excavation. With each whispered confession, each unburdening, Elias felt a tiny fraction of the immense weight he carried begin to lift, held aloft by Noah's steady, unwavering presence. The ritual had begun, and with it, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in Elias's fractured landscape, unveiling the burden. The next knock came 2 nights later, a hesitant tap that barely stirred the quiet air. Noah found Elias on his porch, not with his usual forced cheer, but with a weary slump to his shoulders that spoke of profound exhaustion. The usual sharp cut of his tailored clothes seemed to hang a little looser, and the vivacity that usually sparked in his eyes was muted, replaced by a dull ache. Noah, Elias began, his voice raspy. I hope I'm not imposing. Never, Elias, Noah replied, stepping back to let him in. The simple familiarity of their unspoken routine was beginning to take root. Elias settled onto the worn armchair, a sigh escaping him that sounded less like relief and more like the slow deflation of a balloon. He ran a hand through his perpetually styled hair, a gesture of agitation Noah hadn't seen before. I'm just so damn tired, Noah. I don't know what's happening to me. Noah offered him a mug of chamomile tea, its warmth a small anchor in the room. You seem stretched thin. Elias chuckled, a humorless sound. Thin. That's a good word for it. I feel like I've been running on fumes for months, maybe years. Like I'm just a shell, echoing back what everyone expects of me. He took a long, fortifying gulp of tea. It all just came crashing down, you know? The job, the last relationship. It was a spectacular implosion, a real fireworks display of everything I'd been ignoring. Noah nodded, a silent invitation for Elias to continue. She left, said I was never truly present, that I was always performing. And honestly, she wasn't wrong. I was so busy being the Elias everyone wanted, the life of the party, the successful entrepreneur, the charming date, that I forgot who I actually was. Or maybe I never knew. He rubbed his temples, a deep furrow appearing between his brows. And the work. God, the work. It's a grind, A constant chase after more. But for what? I don't even know what I'm chasing anymore. It just feels hollow. The confession hung in the air, weighty and raw. Noah felt a pang of understanding, a recognition of the profound weariness that permeated Elias's words. The man who had once seemed so effortlessly vibrant, always surrounded by a shifting constellation of admiring faces, was now revealed to be a solitary figure, adrift in his own discontent. It explained the sudden absence of his usual retinue, the lack of late-night laughter spilling from his windows. The constant social dance had been a performance, a shield against something deeper. It sounds like you're experiencing burnout, Elias, Noah offered gently, and a profound questioning of your path. Elias leaned back, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, as if searching for answers among the shadows. Burnout. Yeah, that's it. It's like my internal battery just died. And now I'm looking around at the wreckage of my life, wondering how I ended up here and who this person is in the mirror. He shifted, turning his gaze to Noah. It's why I keep finding myself here, I think. This place. It's quiet. You're quiet. There's no pressure to be anyone but this. He gestured vaguely at himself, a self-deprecating shrug. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the soft tick of Noah's grandfather clock. Elias's shoulders seemed to relax incrementally, the tension that had been etched into his frame slowly beginning to dissipate. The air in Noah's living room, usually just a neutral space, now felt imbued with a subtle, palpable sense of peace, a sanctuary from the relentless demands of Elias's unraveling world. I find myself looking forward to these talks, Noah, Elias admitted, his voice softer, almost reverent. More than I look forward to anything else these days. It's a quiet harbor, a place where I can just breathe without feeling like I'm suffocating. He met Noah's gaze, a flicker of something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. Thank you for just being here. Noah offered a small, reassuring smile. Anytime, Elias, anytime. The words were simple, yet carried the weight of an unspoken promise, a steady hand extended in the encroaching darkness. A glimmer of shared worlds. The late hour had become their unspoken cue. Elias would appear, a shadow against Noah's porch light, his usual vibrancy muted by a profound weariness. Tonight, he carried a mug, steam curling from its rim, a silent offering of shared ritual. Noah, for his part, had set out 2 mugs of chamomile tea, its herbaceous scent a gentle counterpoint to the lingering chill of the night. Rough day? Noah asked, his voice low, as Elias settled onto the worn armchair opposite him. Elias nodded, his eyes fixed on the flickering flame of a small candle Noah had lit. More of the same, Elias admitted, a sigh escaping him. Just going through the motions, pretending to care about quarterly reports and brand synergy when all I really want to do is stare at the ceiling. He chuckled humorlessly, which I've been doing a lot of, actually. It's surprisingly calming. Noah hummed, a soft, understanding sound. He picked up a leather-bound book from the side table, its pages dog-eared and softened with age. You know, he began, his gaze drifting to the cover. I used to do that. Stare at the ceiling, I mean, especially after a long shift, when my mind felt like a tangled ball of yarn. He paused, tracing the gold lettering on the spine. There's a poet, Rilke, who wrote about the importance of being patient with all that is unresolved in your heart, to live the questions now. Elias shifted, his attention snagged. Rilke, huh? Never heard of him. He leaned forward slightly. What does that even mean? Live the questions. Noah flipped open the book to a marked page. His finger found the passage, and he read aloud. his voice a quiet murmur in the stillness. Be patient toward all that is unresolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves like locked rooms and like books that are written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. Silence settled, broken only by the gentle hiss of the kettle on the stove. Elias's eyes, usually so quick to dart around, were still, fixed on some unseen point beyond Noah's shoulder. Wow, he finally breathed, a genuine softness in his tone. That's profound and a little terrifying. Terrifying? Noah prompted, closing the book. Yeah, because it means you can't rush it, can't force the answers. And I've spent my whole life rushing everything, hustling for the next promotion, the next whatever, always chasing, never just being. He looked at Noah, a flicker of raw honesty in his gaze. It's like you're describing exactly what I'm going through right now. All these locked rooms, all these foreign tongues in my head. Noah met his gaze, a quiet understanding passing between them. It's a different kind of bravery, I think, he offered gently, to sit with the uncertainty, to trust that the answers will come, in their own time. He gestured vaguely toward the window, where the first stars were beginning to prick through the deepening blue. It's a bit like looking up at the night sky. You can't force the constellations to reveal themselves. You just observe. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, you start to see the patterns emerge. Elias leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know a lot about stars? Noah smiled faintly, a rare, genuine curve of his lips. A little. My grandfather taught me. He used to say the universe was the greatest story ever told, and the stars were just the punctuation marks. He felt a comfortable warmth spread through him, a feeling he rarely experienced outside the quiet solitude of his own thoughts. Sharing this, these small private corners of his world, with Elias felt right. Unexpected, but undeniably right. Elias, for his part, seemed captivated. That's beautiful. The universe as a story. I never thought of it that way. He took a slow sip of his tea, his gaze following Noah's to the darkening sky outside. So, what's your favorite constellation then? The one that tells the best story? Noah considered, a pleasant weight settling in his chest. Orion, he decided, a hunter, forever chasing. But sometimes, when the light is just right, you can see the faint glow of the Pleiades nearby, the Seven Sisters. A little cluster of stars, always just out of his reach. Elias listened, his usual restless energy completely absent. He absorbed Noah's words, a quiet curiosity in his eyes that made Noah feel remarkably comfortable, remarkably seen. In these shared moments, under the burgeoning night sky, a new kind of connection, fragile but real, began to glimmer between them. Confused feelings. The late autumn air had grown sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. Elias arrived at Noah's door swathed in a thick scarf, his breath pluming in the porch light. He looked less like a man seeking solace, and more like a man bracing himself against an unseen storm. The weariness that had become a familiar companion in his eyes seemed deeper tonight, etched into the lines around them. Noah had come to anticipate these visits. The soft knock, the hushed greeting. Each time Elias seemed to shed another layer of his carefully constructed exterior, revealing the vulnerability beneath. Tonight, however, there was an unfamiliar hesitation in his posture as he settled onto the worn armchair opposite Noah's. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Noah had come to associate with internal turmoil. "Rough day?" Noah offered gently, pushing a mug of chamomile tea across the low table. The steam curled upward, carrying the soothing scent of the herbs. Elias took a long sip, his gaze fixed on the dancing tendrils of vapor. Not rough exactly, just hollow. He paused, then added, "The usual, I suppose. Meetings, presentations, the endless pursuit of—" "What exactly? I'm not even sure anymore." A comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated only by the soft ticking of Noah's grandfather clock. Elias shifted in his chair, his fingers tracing the rim of the mug. Noah watched him, sensing a different kind of struggle unfolding within him tonight, a deeper current beneath the surface of his usual anxieties. Finally, Elias cleared his throat, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of unsaid words. "Noah," he began, his voice lower than usual, almost a whisper. He stopped, glancing up, then quickly away. I've been thinking a lot lately." Noah waited, offering no prompts, just his steady presence. Elias took a deep breath as if steeling himself. "About us. About these conversations. It's different." He looked at Noah then, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Confusion, perhaps, or a nascent understanding he hadn't yet dared to name. "All my life, I've had friends. Good friends, even. But this—" He gestured vaguely between them, then let his hand drop. "This feels distinct." The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken energy. Noah felt his pulse quicken, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. He met Elias's gaze, seeing the raw honesty in it, the vulnerability that had blossomed between them in these late-night hours. "How so?" Noah asked, his voice soft, careful not to break the fragile spell. Elias swallowed, his throat working. "It's like, with everyone else, there's always an expectation, a performance almost. We talk about work, about women, about sports. It's all surface. Even when it feels deep, it's still curated, you know? Like, we're all playing a part." He paused again, searching for the right words. "But with you, it's different. I don't feel like I have to be anyone. I can just be. And I like it. I like it profoundly." The last words hung in the air, resonant with a newfound weight. Elias's brow furrowed, a silent admission of his own bewilderment. He looked genuinely perplexed by the intensity of his own feelings, as if he'd stumbled upon an unexpected landscape within himself. Noah felt a rush of something he couldn't quite name. A gentle elation, a profound sense of recognition. It wasn't just the validation of their connection. It was the quiet courage in Elias's confession, the willingness to articulate a feeling he clearly didn't understand. A warmth, unfamiliar yet comforting, bloomed in Noah's chest, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. It was a feeling that went beyond simple friendship, a recognition of a bond that was deepening into something rare and precious. "I feel it too, Elias," Noah said, his voice a little rougher than he intended. He leaned forward slightly, instinctively wanting to bridge the small gap between them. "This connection, it's unlike anything I've experienced before." Elias met his gaze, and in that moment, the confusion in his eyes seemed to lessen, replaced by a tentative understanding. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a flicker of genuine relief. The quiet tension in the room didn't dissipate entirely, but it transformed, becoming something softer, more intimate. It was an unspoken acknowledgement of a shared secret, a nascent emotion that had just begun to unfurl its petals. The late autumn night outside seemed to hold its breath, listening, closer than before. The confession had hung in the air between them, a fragile, unspoken promise. Noah had felt it, and Elias, he knew, had felt it too. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but rather heavy with the weight of revelation, a quiet understanding settling deep in their bones. The following evening, Noah found himself anticipating the familiar knock with a new intensity. He wasn't just waiting, he was expecting. And when it came, it was earlier than usual, a subtle shift in their established rhythm. Elias stood on the porch, not with his usual weary posture, but with a slight, almost boyish grin. In his hand, he held a brown paper bag, crinkled at the top. "Thought you might be hungry," Elias said, holding out the bag. "Stop by that bakery down the street. They had those chocolate chip cookies you like." Noah took the bag, the warmth of the fresh-baked goods seeping through the paper. "You remembered," he said, a quiet pleasure unfurling in his chest. It wasn't just the cookies. It was the gesture, the thoughtfulness, the breaking of a pattern that spoke volumes. They settled into their usual spots, the living room lamplight casting long shadows across the rug. The conversation flowed differently that night. The previous raw vulnerability had peeled back another layer, revealing something lighter, more comfortable beneath. Elias spoke of his day, not with the usual undercurrent of exhaustion, but with a touch of wry amusement. He recounted a bizarre interaction with a client, making Noah chuckle genuinely for the first time in a while. Noah, in turn, found himself sharing small anecdotes from his own quiet days, details he wouldn't have thought to mention before. The way the light hit the old oak tree in his backyard, the unusual shape of a cloud, the discovery of an antique coin while cleaning out a drawer. Elias listened, truly listened, his gaze steady and engaged. There was no pretense, no performance, just two men sharing the mundane and the meaningful, and finding connection in both. As the weeks bled into a soft tapestry of evenings, these earlier arrivals became the norm. Sometimes Elias would bring a bag of chips, other times a carton of ice cream, always a small, unexpected offering. Their talks would stretch longer, past the point where Elias usually excused himself. The initial urgency that had driven Elias to Noah's door had softened, replaced by a comfortable lingering, as if the world outside simply faded when they were together. Noah began to notice a transformation in Elias. The deep lines of stress that had etched themselves around his eyes seemed to smooth out, subtly but steadily. His laugh, which had once felt almost forced, now erupted freely, a genuine burst of mirth. His eyes, often shadowed with an unspoken burden, now held a brighter, more vibrant sparkle. It was as if a slow internal light was being rekindled within him, and Noah felt a quiet, profound joy in witnessing it. One evening, Elias was recounting a story about a frustrating meeting, but even in his exasperation, there was a lightness in his tone. He paused, looking at Noah, a soft smile gracing his lips. "You know," he said, his voice dropping slightly, "I used to dread coming home. My apartment it felt empty. Now, I actually look forward to it. To this." He gestured vaguely between them, a silent acknowledgement of their shared space, their shared time. Noah felt a warmth spread through him, a recognition of something deep and true. He didn't need to say anything. The gentle squeeze Elias gave his arm before he left that night, a touch that lingered for a fraction longer than usual, spoke volumes. It was a silent affirmation of the unspoken, a quiet promise of something still unfolding, something beautiful and rare. And as Noah watched Elias's retreating figure disappear into the night, he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his heart, that they were closer than before. The sudden silence. The morning sun, usually a welcome guest, seemed to highlight an uncomfortable void. Noah had woken with the familiar anticipation, a quiet joy that had become a constant companion since Elias started arriving earlier. He'd even left the kitchen window slightly ajar, a small, unconscious gesture to welcome the scent of freshly baked pastries, a new, delightful tradition. But the air remained still, carrying only the faint, familiar aroma of his own coffee. He waited. 10 minutes turned into 20. The rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, usually a comforting backdrop, began to feel like a countdown to nothing. No cheerful, slightly off-key hum from the hallway. No light, almost tentative rap on the door, followed by Elias's sheepish grin. Noah found himself pacing the small stretch between the kitchen and the living room, a restless energy humming beneath his skin. He glanced at his phone, then dismissed the impulse to check for messages. Elias rarely texted, preferring their in-person conversations, a preference Noah cherished. By midday, the silence had deepened, transforming from a simple lack of sound into something heavier, more substantial. It settled in the corners of the room, clinging to the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. Noah tried to busy himself, watering his plants, rearranging a bookshelf, but his focus was fractured. Each task felt hollow, imbued with an underlying question. Where is he? The second day dawned with a similar unsettling quiet. Noah's usual morning routine felt disjointed, a performance without an audience. He found himself listening, not for a specific sound, but for the absence of sound. The city's distant hum, the chirping of birds outside, even the creak of his own floorboards, all seemed amplified, yet still failed to fill the growing emptiness. He remembered the ease of their last conversation, the genuine laughter that had bubbled up from Elias, untainted by the familiar strain he used to carry. He remembered the warmth of Elias's gaze, the way his eyes would crinkle at the corners when Noah said something amusing, the way he'd leaned in, a silent confession hanging in the air. The thought of those moments, so vivid and real, made his current unease sharpen into a tangible ache. A week bled into existence, each day a carbon copy of the last in its profound lack of Elias. The flowers he'd bought on Tuesday, hoping to brighten the living room for their next conversation, began to droop, their vibrant petals curling inward. Noah found himself leaving the porch light on at night, a small, illogical beacon against the encroaching darkness. He'd catch himself glancing at the door, expecting to see a shadow fall across the frosted glass, anticipating the familiar silhouette. But the glass remained opaque, reflecting only the muted glow of his living room lamp. His apartment, once a sanctuary of peaceful solitude, now felt vast and echoing. The books on his shelves, the record stacked neatly by the player, the comfortable armchair by the window, all the familiar objects that had always brought him comfort, now seemed to mock him with their static presence. They were witness to a joy that had bloomed so unexpectedly, and now, to its equally sudden disappearance. The air itself felt different, cooler perhaps, or simply devoid of the warmth Elias had brought with him. Noah found himself walking more softly, as if not to disturb the profound stillness. The vibrant hum of anticipation that had recently animated his days had been replaced by a low thrum of worry, a persistent, unsettling vibration beneath his ribs. He pictured Elias, not the weary man who first knocked on his door, but the lighter, more joyful version he'd come to know, the one whose eyes held a new, unguarded vulnerability. He wondered if something had happened, if that lightness had been too fragile, too new, to withstand some unforeseen external force. The absence wasn't just physical, it was an emotional void. The quiet joy Noah had nurtured, the nascent understanding that had begun to blossom between them, now felt like a fragile bloom exposed to an unexpected frost. He missed the way Elias would listen, truly listen, without judgment, offering a quiet understanding that mirrored his own. He missed the unexpected gifts, the shared laughter, the comfortable silences. He missed the feeling of being truly seen, truly connected. And in the sudden, profound silence, Noah realized just how deeply Elias had woven himself into the fabric of his quiet life. The worry grew, a cold knot tightening in his stomach as the days stretched on, each one mirroring the last in its agonizing lack of Elias. Missing a presence, Noah's apartment had become a tomb of sound, the quiet, a suffocating presence where Elias's laughter used to resonate. A full week had bled into another, each day stretching interminably, underscored by a profound void. His gaze invariably drifted to the worn armchair, a phantom silhouette of Elias still occupying it, leaning forward, a spark of familiar curiosity in his spectral eyes. He recalled the gentle, almost shy half gestures Elias would make, emphasizing a point before his hand retreated to his lap. He moved through the kitchen, past the cooling tea in a half-empty mug, a silent sentinel from their last encounter. That night, they dissected old films, celebrated the melancholic beauty of black and white, and Elias, with a sheepish grin, confessed a secret passion for musicals. "Don't tell anyone," he'd whispered, his untainted laughter now a haunting echo in Noah's memory, a cruel, mocking taunt. Had a careless word driven him away? Noah meticulously replayed their final conversation, scrutinizing every utterance. He'd voiced a quiet admiration for Elias's ambition, a casual observation about the drive that propelled him forward. Was it too intimate? Did it feel like an invasion, a judgment delivered? He searched his recollection for any flicker of discomfort, any subtle shift in posture that might have signaled a retreat. Yet, he found only the lingering warmth of shared confidences, the effortless ebb and flow of their dialogue. He longed for the approaching footsteps, the light, almost hesitant knock. He yearned for the familiar clearing of Elias's throat, that tiny preparatory ritual. He missed the incisive questions that compelled Noah to articulate thoughts still nascent in his own mind. Most of all, he missed the profound sense of being truly understood, of having his quiet insights met with genuine engagement, not polite dismissal. The apartment, once a haven of solitude, now felt desolate. He'd always prided himself on his self-reliance, his comfort in his own company. Elias's unexpected intrusion, however, had subtly, irrevocably reshaped his inner landscape. He hadn't grasped the extent to which he'd come to anticipate those late-night visits, how the mere prospect of Elias's presence had imbued his days with a subtle hum of expectation. Noah picked up a book, attempting to lose himself in its pages, but the words blurred into an illegible haze. His mind relentlessly circled back to the same unanswered questions. Had Elias simply moved on? Was this connection so vital to Noah merely a fleeting amusement for Elias, a temporary reprieve from his own unseen struggles? The thought pierced him, a sharp, bitter pang. He dared to open himself, to dismantle the carefully constructed walls of his solitary existence. And now, the silence felt like a profound betrayal. He stood by the window, gazing at the familiar cityscape, the distant streetlights blurring into streaks of orange and white. He tried to conjure Elias's face, to recall the precise shade of his eyes when lost in thought. But the image felt distant, already receding, like a dream fading upon waking. A profound emptiness began to blossom within him, an aching void where Elias's presence had once resided. He wasn't just missing a friend, he realized with a jolt. He was missing a vital facet of his newly discovered self, a self that had only begun to emerge in the gentle, unhurried space they had forged together. The quiet joy Elias had woven into his life had vanished, leaving behind a chilling echo. Empty porch, empty heart. The ritual began subtly, an unconscious tilt of his head as he moved about his apartment, a fleeting glance toward the window. Soon, it became deliberate, a magnetic pull drawing him to the glass, his gaze fixing on the familiar porch across the way, Elias's porch. Every evening, as dusk bled into night, Noah found himself there, a silent sentinel, his breath fogging the pain. He traced the outline of the empty swing, the silent planters, the dark doorway, willing a shadow to materialize, a light to flick on. He'd replay their last conversation, the words echoing in the quiet of his mind, searching for a hidden meaning, a subtle clue he might have missed. Had his quiet admiration, his almost reverent listening, been too much? Had the intensity of his gaze, the unspoken understanding that had grown between them, felt like a burden? He'd seen Elias's ambition, his drive to succeed, and had perhaps in his own way fueled it, celebrated it. Had that inadvertently driven him away? The thought was a cold, sharp blade, twisting in the hollow space Elias had left behind. Days bled into a week, then another. The hope, initially a persistent ember, began to flicker, threatening to extinguish completely. Each night, as the streetlights hummed to life, Noah felt the slow creep of despair. The empty porch wasn't just a physical absence, it was a gaping wound in his chest, a constant ache that resonated with every beat of his heart. The quiet of his apartment, once a comforting cocoon, now felt like a vast echoing chamber, amplifying his solitude. He found himself wandering through the rooms, his fingers brushing against surfaces Elias had seen, had touched, had brought to life with his stories. The worn armchair where Elias often sat, leaning forward, his eyes alight with a new idea, or heavy with a past regret. The chipped mug Noah always filled with tea, now relegated to the back of the cupboard, its warmth a phantom sensation. Every object, every corner, seemed imbued with Elias's ghost, a reminder of the vibrant presence that had once filled his quiet life. The world outside continued its relentless pace, oblivious to Noah's personal earthquake. Neighbors walked their dogs, children played in the park, cars hummed past. But for Noah, time had ceased to flow. He was trapped in a perpetual twilight, caught between the memory of a profound connection and the stark reality of its sudden disappearance. The newly discovered self Elias had helped him unearth, the one that felt bolder, more open, more truly him, now felt like a fragile seedling exposed to a harsh, unforgiving winter. One particularly still evening, the air heavy with an impending storm, Noah stood at his window for what felt like hours. Rain began to patter, soft at first, then growing into a steady drumbeat against the glass. He watched as the streetlights cast long, shimmering reflections on the wet asphalt. Elias's porch remained a dark, unwavering void. There was no shadow, no movement, no sign. The feeling of finality, of an irrevocable end, settled over him with a crushing weight. He turned away from the window. The image of the empty porch burned into his mind. The apartment felt colder, the silence deeper. He made himself a simple dinner, the food tasteless in his mouth. He tried to read, but the words blurred, the stories failing to capture his attention. Every rustle of leaves outside, every creak of the old house, sent a jolt of false hope through him, only to be replaced by a deeper wave of disappointment. He went to bed, but sleep was a distant shore he couldn't reach. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, the rain a lullaby of sorrow against his window. He remembered Elias's laugh, a deep, rich sound that had once filled these very rooms. He remembered the vulnerability in Elias's eyes, the raw honesty that had drawn Noah in. He remembered the quiet comfort of their shared silences, the feeling of being truly seen, truly understood. Now, only silence remained. An empty porch, an empty heart, the fear that Elias might be gone for good, not just from his porch, but from his life, was a chilling certainty that settled deep in his bones. The profound, uncurated bond they had formed, a bond Noah hadn't even known he was missing until it was there, was now just a phantom limb, an ache where something vital used to be. The unasked questions, the unspoken feelings, hung heavy in the air, a silent testament to what had been and what was no more. A return and a revelation. The silence in Noah's apartment had grown into a palpable entity, a thick, suffocating blanket that pressed down on him, muffling every sound, every thought. Days had blurred into a monotonous cycle of waking, staring at Elias's vacant porch, replaying conversations, and then succumbing to a restless sleep. The vivid ghost of Elias, once a comforting presence, had become a tormentor, a constant reminder of what was lost. Hope, that fragile, persistent thing, had finally shriveled and died, leaving behind only the ash of despair. Noah had begun to believe that Elias was truly gone, a fleeting comet that had briefly illuminated his mundane orbit before streaking off into an unknown void. He'd started to mentally dismantle the shrine he'd built in his mind, the careful collection of shared laughter, late-night confessions, and unspoken understandings. It was a painful, slow process, like pulling teeth without anesthetic, each memory a new jab of agony. He was in the midst of this morbid ritual one evening, a half-eaten plate of takeout long forgotten on the coffee table, a documentary about deep-sea creatures murmuring unnoticed on the television screen. The apartment was dimly lit, a single lamp casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock his solitude. He was staring at the wall, lost in the echo chamber of his own thoughts, when it came. A hesitant knock. It wasn't the confident, almost demanding rap Elias usually employed, nor was it the tentative scratch of someone unsure of their welcome. This was something in between, a soft, almost apologetic series of taps that nevertheless cut through the oppressive silence like a shard of glass. Noah froze. His heart, which had been beating with a dull, steady rhythm of resignation, suddenly lurched, then hammered against his ribs with a frantic energy. He told himself it was the wind, a branch hitting the glass, anything but what his gut instinct was screaming at him. He held his breath, listening. Another knock, slightly more insistent this time, yet still imbued with that strange, cautious politeness. He slowly pushed himself up from the sofa, his limbs feeling stiff and uncooperative, as if encased in lead. His eyes darted to the door, then to the window, half expecting to see some trick of the light, some cruel illusion. The air in the room suddenly felt charged, thick with an electric anticipation that both thrilled and terrified him. He walked towards the door, each step a deliberate effort, his mind racing. Was it a prank? Had he left something outside? The possibilities, however absurd, flitted through his consciousness, anything to avoid the one truth his heart was already whispering. He reached the door, his hand hovering over the cold metal of the doorknob. He hesitated for a long moment. The silence on the other side, now complete, save for the frantic pounding of his own blood in his ears. He swallowed, a dry, scratchy sound, and then, with a slow, deliberate twist, he opened the door. Elias stood there. He looked different. His usual vibrant energy seemed reined in, replaced by a nervous tremor in his hands, which he clasped in front of him. His eyes, those expressive pools of amber, flickered with an uncharacteristic uncertainty, though a small hopeful smile tentatively curved his lips. He was wearing a dark, unassuming jacket and jeans, a stark contrast to the tailored shirts and polished shoes Noah was accustomed to seeing him in. A faint flush touched his cheekbones, and his hair, usually meticulously styled, was slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his hands through it repeatedly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The low hum of the deep-sea documentary filtered out from Noah's apartment, a bizarre soundtrack to their unexpected reunion. Noah just stared, his mind struggling to reconcile the apparition before him with the ghost that had haunted his every waking moment. The air between them crackled with unspoken questions, with the weight of weeks of absence, of despair, and now of a fragile, almost unbelievable return. Elias shifted his weight, his hopeful smile wavering slightly, waiting. Love, unspoken, now spoken. Elias stood on Noah's doorstep, the familiar porch light casting a soft glow on his face, illuminating the uncertainty etched around his eyes. He fidgeted, his gaze darting from Noah's bewildered expression to the floorboards. The air crackled with unspoken questions, with the weight of weeks of silence and the sudden, jarring presence of the man Noah had begun to mourn. Noah, Elias began, his voice a husky whisper, barely audible above the distant hum of the city. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I know this is unexpected. I know I left. Noah remained motionless, a statue carved from confusion and a faint, burgeoning hope he dared not acknowledge. He watched Elias, searching for the bravado, the carefully constructed facade he'd once known, but found only raw vulnerability. Elias looked smaller somehow, less defined by the sharp edges of his previous persona. Elias took a deep, shuddering breath, as if bracing himself for an impact. His eyes, the same captivating blue Noah remembered, finally met Noah's. This time, they held no glint of casual amusement or practiced charm, only a profound earnestness that sent a shiver down Noah's spine. I've been away, Elias continued, his voice gaining a fragile strength, trying to figure things out, trying to figure myself out. And you. He paused, his gaze unwavering, and a faint flush crept up his neck. I kept running, Noah, from everything, from myself, from the mess I'd made of my life, from what I felt here. He gestured vaguely between them, a silent acknowledgement of the space they'd built together in the late night hours. Noah's heart thumped a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He wanted to speak, to demand answers, to ask where he'd been, why he'd left, if he was all right. But the words caught in his throat, choked by the sheer emotional impact of Elias's presence. The quiet intensity of his confession. He simply waited, his gaze locked with Elias's, a silent invitation for him to continue. I thought if I just disappeared, it would all go away, Elias said, a self-deprecating laugh escaping him, devoid of humor. The confusion, the longing, the feeling that you were the only real thing in my life. His voice dropped to a near whisper, a fragile thread in the stillness. But it didn't go away. It only got stronger. Every day I was gone, every night I spent alone, I missed you, Noah, terribly. Noah felt a warmth spread through his chest, a sensation he hadn't realized he'd been missing until this very moment. It was the warmth of recognition, of being seen, of a bond that transcended the physical. Elias took another fortifying breath, his shoulders squaring slightly, as if steeling himself for the most difficult part. His eyes, though still holding a trace of nervousness, now shone with a newfound resolve. He stepped a fraction closer, narrowing the small distance between them. I spent so much of my life chasing after things I thought I wanted, Elias admitted, his voice raspy with emotion. Approval, attention, the illusion of connection. But it was all hollow, empty. And then there was you. He paused, his gaze softening, a tender light entering his eyes that Noah had never witnessed before. You didn't ask for anything. You just listened. You saw me, truly saw me, for the first time in my life. The air thickened with unspoken emotion, with the weight of weeks of despair and the sudden, breathtaking possibility of redemption. Noah's breath hitched in his throat. Elias's hand trembled slightly as he reached out, not to touch but to hover, an inch from Noah's arm. His gaze, unblinking, held Noah's. I know it's a lot, he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet infused with a quiet power. And I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I couldn't stay away anymore. I couldn't pretend it wasn't real. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if gathering every ounce of courage he possessed, then opened them, his gaze direct and unwavering, filled with an honesty that stripped away every artifice. I think I love you, Noah. The words hung in the air, shimmering with the weight of their significance, a fragile, exquisite melody. Noah's heart didn't just flutter, it soared, a magnificent bird breaking free from a cage. A warm, incandescent joy bloomed in his chest, chasing away the lingering shadows of doubt and despair. A slow, tender smile spread across his face, a genuine, unburdened expression of pure happiness. He didn't hesitate. As Elias's words echoed in the sudden profound silence, Noah extended his hand, palm open, fingers slightly curled, a silent offering, an unspoken acceptance. His touch was an invitation, a promise, a new beginning. Elias's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise, then profound relief washing over them. He stared at Noah's outstretched hand, then back into Noah's smiling eyes, a tentative, hopeful smile of his own beginning to form on his lips. His own hand, still trembling slightly, reached out, meeting Noah's in a soft, tentative clasp. The connection was electric, a current of shared emotion, a silent affirmation of all that had been and all that was yet to be.